Under the cold light of the alien prison chamber, Captain Rian sat with his hands bound by metallic cuffs. The room smelled of burnt metal and strange chemicals that made the air heavy. The walls were not smooth like human steel, but alive with veins of glowing green energy that pulsed slowly as if the ship itself was breathing. The aliens had taken his weapons and his armor, but they could not take the calm expression from his face. He sat still on the hard floor, not speaking, not moving too much, only watching and waiting. His eyes followed every corner, every sound, every shadow in the room. 2 alien guards stood by the door, their tall bodies covered in bone-like armor plates that clicked when they shifted. Their voices were sharp and hissing as they spoke in their language. They did not know Rian understood parts of it. They laughed in their broken tones, saying this human was nothing, saying he would be used as a tool to break the spirit of his people. They called Earth weak. They spoke of his world as if it was already taken. They mocked him, but Rian did not react. He looked like a broken soldier, but inside his mind he counted every second, every word, every pattern of their steps. The guards believed the silence meant fear. They believed this prisoner had no strength left. They could not see the slow, controlled breathing of a man who had trained his mind to wait for the smallest chance. Rian's eyes narrowed when the green veins on the wall flickered faintly. It looked like a simple power shift, but to him it meant something more. He had studied alien ships before. He knew they were alive with energy flows connected to one system. He memorized the rhythm like he was listening to a heartbeat. When one guard moved closer, spitting out a cruel laugh, Rian lowered his head slightly, hiding the faintest smile. The guard did not notice. He only saw a defeated prisoner staring at the floor. He tapped the ground with his boot before turning away, but he did not know that Rian had already matched the sound of his tap with the pulsing wall lights. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle. Every mistake the aliens made was a gift. Minutes passed like hours inside that chamber. A distant rumble echoed through the ship above them, the vibration reaching the cell floor. Rian lifted his head just a little, listening carefully. The guards exchanged words. They said the humans outside had been pushed back. They said resistance was failing. They laughed again, louder this time. Arrogance filled the room like a heavy fog. To them, he was only a symbol of defeat, a trophy to display when their victory was complete. But Rian was not a trophy. He was the knife hidden inside the cloth. He shifted slightly against the cuffs. They were tight and burned against his skin, but he did not struggle. He knew the material was designed to break bones if forced. Instead, he leaned back against the wall, letting his breathing stay calm. In the silence, he began tapping the tip of his finger against his thigh in a slow rhythm. It sounded like nothing. It looked like a nervous habit. The guards ignored it, but the rhythm carried meaning. Hidden deep inside the lining of his uniform, a fragment of human technology still lived. A micro-device no larger than a grain of rice waited for his signal. Each tap sent a vibration too small for alien ears, but strong enough for the device. The ship was massive and full of noise, yet the signal moved quietly like a shadow. It slipped into the veins of energy and followed. The pulse. The aliens thought their prisoner was still and broken, but in truth, their prisoner was reaching into the heart of their own ship. Rian kept his face expressionless as he felt the device respond with a faint warmth against his skin. Step 1 had begun. One of the guards turned and glared at him, his yellow eyes glowing faintly. The alien hissed a question, asking if the human understood that his world would burn. Rian lifted his gaze, slowly meeting those strange eyes. For the first time, he spoke a single word in their own language. The word was quiet, but sharp. It meant not yet. The guard stiffened, surprised that the human knew their tongue. He stepped forward in anger, raising a weapon that looked like a long staff with burning edges. The other guard hissed in warning, but Rian did not move. He let the moment pass. Staff lowered again as the guards muttered to each other. They decided he was weak and playing games. They decided he was not a threat. Rian lowered his head again, his mind racing faster than ever. He knew he had only a short window before the device reached deeper into the systems. He had only one chance to turn his capture into something greater. The guards returned to their corner, losing interest. They spoke of their commander who would come soon to question him. Rian closed his eyes just for a moment, pretending to rest. But inside, he was listening to the ship itself. He was waiting for the next pulse, for the next signal. The chamber was quiet again, except for the steady hum of alien power and the faint tapping of one human finger against his leg. To anyone watching it was nothing. To the aliens it was meaningless. But for Rian, it was the sound of hope hidden beneath silence. The game had started, and though the aliens believed they held a hostage, the truth was far more dangerous. They were holding the one man who had come prepared. The cell remained dim, with only the faint green glow running through the walls, but Captain Rian's mind was no longer inside that cold chamber. His thoughts stretched into the systems of the alien ship through the tiny device hidden in his clothing. He kept his face calm, his body still, his eyes half closed, as if he had given up. The guards leaned against the doorframe board, whispering about their next meal. They never noticed how his finger tapped the rhythm with perfect patience, never to fast, never to slow. Every tap carried the pulse of a soldier who knew exactly what he was doing. Far above his cell, the signal moved deeper through the ship's network. The device had been created by human engineers for missions exactly like this one. It was small, nearly invisible, but it could slip into foreign systems and learn. Arian had memorized its code long before capture. He had trained to use it without any visible sign. With each tap, he was sending instructions. At first, the signal only observed. It touched the lights in a far corridor, making them flicker once. It brushed against the temperature control, making a vent hiss softly. The aliens thought nothing of it. They believed it was just their ship's natural pulse. Rian opened his eyes slightly and watched the guards again. Their armor plates were thick, their weapons sharp, but their discipline was weak. They trusted their technology too much. They trusted fear. He had seen this before in every war. The enemy that underestimates humans always falls hardest. The guards spoke louder now, their language rough and full of arrogance. They said the prisoner would be paraded before their leader. They said the humans were broken animals. Their laughter echoed against the living walls. Rian let the words wash over him without showing reaction. But in his chest, his heart beat stronger each time they mocked Earth. The hum of the ship grew sharper. Rian felt it through the cuffs, pressing into his wrists. The ship was alive, and he was learning its rhythm like a soldier learns the sound of his own rifle. He leaned his head back against the wall and let his memory drift for a moment to the battlefield where he had been captured. The memory was quick, but clear. Flames in the sky, human ships breaking against the alien fleet, his squad fighting to the last second. He had given the order for them to retreat, but he had stayed behind. He had allowed himself to be taken not as a mistake, but as a plan. He opened his eyes again and looked at the glowing veins across the cell wall. He counted each flicker. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. It was the same as a code he had studied in training. He whispered under his breath, barely audible to anyone human or alien. He whispered numbers the same rhythm as the flicker. The device understood. A spark passed silently through the alien system and reached the chamber door. For a fraction of a second, the lock loosened and tightened again. Rian smiled faintly to himself. The device was inside. The guards heard nothing, saw nothing. Of them tapped his claws against the doorframe, yawning with a sound like scraping metal. The other muttered about the human silence. They thought it was weakness, but it was patience. Rian sat like a shadow, waiting for the right second. He had learned this in survival training. Silence was not surrender. It was a weapon sharper than steel. The vibration under the floor changed again. It was slight, like the difference between two heartbeats, but he felt it. Somewhere far away, the ship's lights dimmed for a second. The guards looked up annoyed, muttering about power errors. They hit the wall with their weapons as if striking it would make the pulse steady again. Rian kept his eyes closed, hiding the fire that grew in them. Every flicker meant his plan was alive. Every glitch was his doing. He moved his bound hands slightly, feeling the burn of the cuffs. They were still too strong to break, but he no longer cared, did not need to break them yet. He only needed time. He whispered again one word in his own language: patience. His voice was so soft it sounded like a breath, but it gave him strength. The device responded with another faint warmth against his side. Step 2 was almost complete, the guards argued, now blaming each other for the strange hum in the walls. They had no idea that the prisoner they ignored had already begun to rewrite the heart of their ship. They had no idea that every laugh, every insult only gave him more reason to strike harder when the time was right. To them he was still nothing, but a defeated human. To Rian they were already walking into a trap they could not see. The silence returned heavier than before. The green veins glowed softly across the wall, pulsing like blood. Captain Rian sat with his eyes half closed, his face calm, his body chained. But beneath that calm surface his mind was racing faster than any machine. The ship was listening to him now, and soon, very soon, it would obey. The aliens thought they had a hostage, but they were holding a man who had already begun to turn their greatest weapon against them. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the cell, and both guards snapped to attention. The tall shadow of their commander appeared in the doorway before stepping inside. His armor was darker than the others, carved with glowing red lines that marked rank and power. His eyes burned like molten metal as they fixed on the prisoner. Captain Rian remained seated on the cold floor, his posture still, and his face calm, but his mind was alert. Watching every detail of the alien leader's movements, the commander carried himself with the arrogance of a ruler who believed his victory was already written. He spoke in a deep voice filled with contempt. His words carried through the chamber in the alien tongue, but Rian understood them clearly. The commander declared that Earth would kneel. He said humanity would soon be slaves scattered under the stars, and that Rian himself would serve as proof of alien supremacy. He projected a hologram from a device on his arm, showing images of alien fleets burning through human colonies. The guards hissed in cruel laughter, their voices bouncing off the living walls. Rian raised his eyes slowly to meet the commander's gaze. He did not flinch at the images or the threats. He did not answer the insults. He only studied every detail, the way the commander's hand hovered over the hologram controls. The rhythm of the glowing veins on the floor, the slight delay when the ship responded to his orders. His silence made the commander smile with pride. The alien thought the human was broken, that fear had stolen his voice. He believed he was standing over prey that no longer had teeth. The commander leaned closer, his sharp faceplate inches away. From Rian, his voice grew lower, almost a whisper, as he promised that humanity's final defenses were already falling. He spoke of Rian's people as though they were insects. Rian listened quietly, but behind his eyes a storm brewed. He had seen overconfidence before on human battlefields, leaders to certain a victory, blind to the smallest details. The aliens were powerful, but they carried the same weakness. They underestimated him. When the commander finished his speech, he straightened and let out a laugh that rattled the chamber. He ordered the guards to keep the prisoner alive until the fleet reached Earth, then turned and left the room. His footsteps faded into the corridor, leaving behind the echo of arrogance. The guards relaxed again, muttering proudly about their leader's words. They did not notice the change in the air. They did not feel the subtle shift in the ship's hum. Rian lowered his head once more, hiding the faint curve of a smile that crept across his face. His device had listened, while the commander spoke. Every second, every image, every signal from the hologram had been captured. He now knew more about the alien systems than they realized. He knew the delays in their commands, the weak points in their energy flow, the arrogance that blinded them to small errors. He knew enough to begin weaving his plan. He shifted slightly against the cuffs, feeling the burn against his skin. The guards thought nothing of it, too busy talking about glory and conquest. Rian whispered to himself, a word so soft it could have been mistaken for a breath. Soon, the device warmed again in response. Deep within the ship, small changes spread quietly like invisible cracks in stone. Lights in distant corridors flickered. Doors hesitated before opening. The guards assumed it was nothing, just the ship's natural pulse. The silence returned heavy and thick. Rian closed his eyes again, not to rest, but to picture the entire ship in his mind. He could see the flow of energy like rivers running through a living body. He could hear the rhythm of the systems, each pulse a step in a dance only he understood. He sat chained in a cell, but already he was walking the corridors in his mind, marking every weakness, planning every move. The guards grew quiet as time passed, their arrogance fading into boredom. One leaned against the wall with his weapon at his side. The other scratched at the living veins in the corner. To them, the human was nothing more than a trophy, a symbol of victory. But in truth, the trophy was sharpening his blade in silence. The commander believed he had humiliated his prisoner. The guards believed they were safe. None of them realized the game had already turned against them. Captain Rian opened his eyes slowly. They burned with quiet determination, though his face remained calm. He let his breathing match the pulse of the ship, slow and steady, as if sinking his life to the heart of his enemy. The aliens thought they were in control, but every flicker, every hum, every second of their arrogance gave him more power. He was no hostage. He was the shadow waiting to strike, and the ship itself was becoming his weapon. Captain Rian sat with his back against the wall, the cuffs still biting into his wrists, but his thoughts were not chained. The device hidden in his uniform had already stretched into the veins of the alien ship, and now it was feeding him information with every faint flicker in the walls. He studied the rhythm carefully. Each pulse carried meaning. Each pause was a doorway. The guards had grown lazy again, standing at the far end of the chamber, whispering in their guttural voices. To them, nothing was happening. To Rian, everything was moving. He whispered a string of numbers under his breath, the words so faint they disappeared into the hum of the ship. With each number, the device adjusted, reaching deeper, slipping into pathways the aliens had never imagined could be breached. The lights dimmed for half a second before returning. One guard hissed at the wall, muttering about faulty energy streams, but then dismissed it with a wave of his claw. They did not suspect the prisoner. It was their mistake, Rian's training returned to him in sharp detail. Years ago, he had been taught to look beyond weapons and muscle. He had been taught to see the battlefield as a system of patterns. Patterns could be studied, and anything studied could be broken. The aliens had their power, but they were blind to their own overconfidence. They laughed at the idea of human resistance. They had no idea that the quiet tapping of one man's finger was carving holes into the very heart of their warship. He shifted his weight slightly and closed his eyes, as if exhausted. In truth, he was listening. The ship's hum had changed again, softer, stretched. The device was no longer just watching, it was touching. It reached into door controls, weapon circuits, and even the ship's power core, planted small errors, delays of less than a second, misfires too small to be noticed in the moment. But Rian knew what small errors could become when timed correctly. A delay in a weapons charge, a door refusing to open in combat, a life support glitch at the wrong second. The foundation of their strength was beginning to crack. The guards chuckled to themselves, one striking the wall with the butt of his weapon. Rian opened his eyes and whispered again, this time not numbers, but fragments of the alien language he had studied in silence since his capture. Each word was broken, rough, but enough for the device to recognize. The ship's systems responded to language, and now it believed he was one of them. He felt the cuffs vibrate for a moment as though the ship itself had breathed in his words. His lips curled faintly. Step by step, the trap was forming. A low alarm sounded somewhere far above the cell. The guards looked at each other, alert for the first time. They hissed in confusion, then relaxed when the sound faded. They called it a minor system error. Rian tilted his head and studied their reactions carefully. They dismissed problems quickly. They trusted their ship too much. They trusted fear too much. It would not see danger until it was too late. The hum grew stronger again, vibrating. Through the floor beneath him, he imagined the pathways, imagined the veins of energy, carrying his commands deeper. He whispered one last word in the alien tongue. Ready? The device pulsed in answer, warm against his side. Somewhere above, a door sealed shut without command. Somewhere else, lights went dark for 3 seconds before recovering. The aliens rushed to fix the errors, never realizing these were not errors at all. They were warnings. Rian leaned forward slightly, his eyes opening fully now. For the first time, they glimmered with quiet fire. He spoke in his own language this time, his voice barely more than a whisper, just a little longer. The guards did not hear him, but the ship did. The plan was no longer a thought. was alive, spreading through the alien vessel like unseen roots. Soon, when the moment was right, those roots would tear the entire structure apart. The chamber fell silent again. The guards returned to their lazy stance, their weapons hanging loose at their sides. They believed the human was harmless. They believed their ship was unbreakable. Captain Rion closed his eyes once more, calm and patient, but inside his mind he could already hear it. The sound of an empire cracking under the weight of its own arrogance. The aliens thought they held control, but they had unknowingly handed him the keys to their most powerful weapon. All he had to do was turn them. The silence of the prison chamber shattered when the ship groaned with a sudden deep vibration. The floor beneath Captain Rion trembled as if the vessel itself was struggling to breathe. The guards stiffened, their eyes narrowing with confusion. They hissed at each other, gripping their weapons tighter, but they had no answers. Lights along the corridor outside flickered wildly, plunging the chamber into brief darkness before glowing again in sickly green. To the aliens it was chaos, but to Rion, it was the rhythm he had been waiting for. Lifted his head slowly, his calm eyes reflecting the pulsing glow. The device hidden in his uniform had finally reached the core of the alien system. Tap, every whispered command, every patient breath had led to this moment. Now the ship itself answered to him. His cuffs shivered against his wrists, the metal heating before releasing with a sharp hiss. The guards turned instantly, their weapons raised, but hesitation showed in their stance. The human was supposed to be helpless. The shackles were not. Supposed to open, Rion rose to his feet with measured control. He did not rush. He stood tall, his posture strong, and for the first time, he looked directly at his captors, without hiding the fire in his eyes. The guards shouted in their language, demanding that he stay down, but their weapons sputtered with sparks when they tried to fire. Their staff-like guns hissed with energy for a brief second before shutting down completely. Their overconfidence cracked into fear. The ship's hum grew louder, turning into a roar that vibrated through the walls. Doors across the corridor slammed shut, locking alien soldiers out. Ventilation systems reversed with a screech, filling the air with a burning scent. The guards staggered in confusion, shouting to each other, unable to understand why their vessel was betraying them. Rion stepped forward, his footsteps steady and deliberate. The floor lights beneath him flickered in rhythm with each step, as if the ship itself was bowing to his presence. One guard lunged at him with a roar, swinging the heavy staff. Rion tilted his head slightly and whispered a command under his breath. The staff's edge sparked violently before exploding in the alien's hand. The blast threw the creature backward into the wall, his armored plates cracking on impact. The second guard hesitated, fear overtaking his arrogance, shouted for reinforcements, but the combs on his wrist only screeched with static. No one answered. No one could. Rion moved closer, his voice calm and sharp as a blade. He thought, "I was your hostage. You thought Earth was weak. But this ship was never yours the moment you brought me aboard." The guard snarled, rushing forward in desperation, but the chamber door sealed tight before he could escape. The green veins along the wall pulsed brighter, reacting to Rion's presence. The alien weapon in his hand overheated, glowing red before. It too failed, forcing him to drop it with a cry of pain. The chamber shook again, this time stronger. Alarms wailed across the vessel in tones of panic. Rion raised his hand slightly, and the cuffs he had worn clattered to the floor like broken chains. His eyes burned with quiet triumph. He was no longer the prisoner. He was the master of the very heart that carried his enemies through the stars. The guard stumbled back, his arrogance shattered. He hissed questions in his language, how, why, impossible, but Rion gave no answer. Instead, he whispered another command. The floor split with a violent spark, sending the alien crashing to his knees. The lights flared so brightly, they nearly blinded him. Rion stood tall above the chaos, his silhouette sharp against the glowing walls. The transformation was complete. The hostage the aliens had mocked was gone. In his place stood the soldier who had outwitted an empire's pride. Captain Rion was no longer waiting. The time for silence had ended. The ship was his weapon now, and the first strike was about to begin. The ship's alarms screamed through every corridor, red lights flashing as if the great vessel itself had been thrown into panic. Alien soldiers shouted orders in their harsh tongue, but half the doors sealed shut before they could reach their posts. Weapons failed in their hands, energy cores refused to charge, and the once mighty warship groaned like a dying beast. Deep inside its heart, Captain Rian walked through the chaos with calm steps, the path opening before him, as if the ship itself chose to obey. The guards that once mocked him were one unconscious against the wall, the other trapped by his own fear. Rian did not look back. His eyes were fixed forward as the doors of the chamber slid open for him alone. The corridor stretched wide and alive with flickering veins of light. Every pulse moved in rhythm with his steps. He whispered commands under his breath, mixing numbers with fragments of alien words, and the systems bent to his will. Doors closed behind him, lights dimmed, and alarms shifted to false signals that confused the enemy. The ship had become his battlefield, and he was already winning. Alien soldiers appeared at the far end of the hall, their weapons raised. They shouted threats, their armor glinting in the flickering glow. Rian remained still for a moment, his face calm. Then he raised his hand, slowly. The lights above them burst with a crack, showering sparks onto their armor. Their weapons locked, refusing to fire. One soldier struck his gun in frustration before it exploded in his hands. The blast threw the entire squad to the floor. Stepped past them without a glance. He did not need to fight. The ship itself was fighting for him. As he moved closer to the command deck, he activated the device fully. His voice lowered, calm but firm. Link. The word spread through the veins of the ship like fire through dry wood. Screens across the vessel flickered, shifting from alien codes to human signals. Rian's eyes glimmered as Earth's fleet came into views, maul, battered, but alive. His signal had reached them. His position had been marked. Reinforcements were on their way. Inside the command chamber, the alien commander turned in fury, his burning eyes wide as the doors slid open. He shouted in rage, demanding his crew to restore control, but their consoles flashed red with warnings. The systems no longer answered to them. Rian stepped inside slowly, his presence calm and steady, every movement deliberate. The commander snarled, his voice echoing like thunder. He accused the human of trickery, of impossible theft. He called him nothing. Rian's expression did not change. He spoke with quiet certainty, his words cutting through the chaos. Earth is not the one under threat. You are. At his command, the screens behind him displayed the human fleet now locking onto the alien warship's position. The commander lunged in fury, his blade raised, but before he could strike the floor, surged with violent energy, throwing him back into his own throne. Sparks rained across the chamber as systems collapsed under Rian's control. He stood in the center of the chaos, his figure calm while the alien empire's pride burned around him.
Ow.
The commander struggled to rise, his arrogance replaced by disbelief, looked at the man they had called weak, the prisoner they thought helpless, and finally saw the truth too late. The hostage had been the hunter all along. Rian placed his hand on the glowing control pillar, his voice steady and sharp. Transmit. The ship itself obeyed, sending full coordinates to Earth's fleet. Human reinforcements moved faster now, their weapons locked on target. Rian turned his eyes once more to the broken commander. This is where your victory ends. The walls shuddered with power as the human fleet prepared to strike. Rian stood tall, his shadow cast wide by the flickering lights. He had been silent, he had been patient, and now he was the storm. The aliens thought they had captured humanity's weakness, but they had chained humanity's sharpest blade instead. The hostage had become the executioner, and this moment was only the beginning of humanity's counterattack among the stars.